and today we start our series on conversations with, and our guest today is Kia Reilly, owner and manager and educator at Wyndarra Childcare Centre and Kindergarten located in Hoppers Crossing. Kia's been in the childcare industry for over 20 years, and she has an advanced diploma in childcare. She's got tons of experience. And hi, Kia, thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Sarah. Look forward to our little meeting today.
I know that's the main focus of what we want to talk about, which is developmental delays, NDIS, and also what childcare centres like yours can do to assist parents. So can we just talk about what happens when at an early childhood centre like yours to monitor developmental milestones for children?
Right. So a lot of our records come from observations and conversations with families. You gain a lot by a positive relationship, open communication between the pair, what's observed at home, what's observed here at the childcare centre. Then we do documentation on the child. We're recording their milestones, how they're achieving it, where they are with their development.
All right.
Yeah.
And how do you record and pick up on these milestones? Do you have a document that you go through? Do you have questionnaires, that sort of thing?
There's a few different ways. Initial enrolment, there is a form that is given out to families, and on that form is a bit of a checklist of where their child is at the age of entering the service and what their little milestones are. Is your child already walking? Are they engaging in conversation, using one word, 2 words? A little bit of a checklist is gathered right from day dot. After that, we use our general observations, of course, but then we use a program called Early Ables, and that is a series of questions where we can gauge where the child is at and the things that they're doing, and a report is then developed, and that will show where the child is at and what we can do to get the child to reach their goals or where they need to be.
Right. So you speak with educators in the child's class. So let's take an example of a child, maybe. How old would you say when they first enter into your centre might be?
Well, we have children that can enter our service at 6 weeks. The normal age is around about 6 months. However, we start really making notes of the child's progress and using the Early Ables report when the child turns 2.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, so there is an age gap. It's 2 till 6 is when we really use the Early Ables report. Prior to that, definitely open communication, and if there is some concerns, especially with our new little babies, then we do refer them to people like the health nurse. But as they progress and get a little bit older, we can start identifying some milestone delays and support the families so they can best achieve them.
Thank you, Kia. What sort of supports do you provide once there is identification of some developmental delays? So could you tell us about that?
I sure can. We start in gently. So we make subtle changes within the environment with the use of visual aids, for example. So we cut our terminology back down. We use shorter sentences, shorter words that are very clear and crisp to the child. So we might put a stop sign on the door. So visually the child is saying, stop, I can't go out. And then with the educator saying, stop, using hand gestures, the visual aid, the child will then learn that that's the boundary that they need to fall within. So little things like that, even with drink, nappy change, we might use the card so they know what's coming, takes away the anxiety of the room. We ensure our environment is a very predictable one, so we stick with the routine so the children know what's coming next, and that's very important. Children really like structure and a predictable environment, so we make sure that that's available for the child. And we get to know the individual children. So if we know a certain child is very happy and calm with water and engaged, we'll provide lots of activities to support that child, and then we're able to really engage with their learning. So that's the basic step we start with within the environment. And then, of course, we need to have conversations with families as well.
Sure.
So what we introduce in our childcare services, it's really important that the family do support at home as well, and vice versa. So we're working together. that continual care for the child. So at our service, if we use visual aids with the child, we'll provide them for the families as well.
Okay.
So at home, they're using the same one, the same stop card, the same please don't hit card. It's going to be very much the same. Even when it comes to our emotional regulation stories, we have one that we read in a group time, and then we provide it at home as well, so the parents can continue on with that story at home, so they can identify the feelings and emotions that they're feeling at home. So that's the first step in providing support within the room. The next step would be having conversations with the families. And this sometimes can be very tricky. It can be very tricky to hear that your child might need a little bit of support in different areas. Everyone wants the best for their child.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. It can be difficult for the families, and it can be difficult for the child experiencing frustration and so forth as well.
And just not being able to communicate it is very hard for the child. Yeah.
And so there would be supports outside of the childcare centre that families can access. And earlier when you were talking to me earlier, you mentioned red flags. What is red flags? Do you want to let?
Yes. So Red Flags is a document that was designed by the Queensland government, and that is very clear of where the children should be, what they should be achieving by a certain age. So maybe 6 months would be holding a bottle. 1 year could be learning to say 1 or 2 words. And this is a bit of a checklist. So if a parent or an educator was looking at a child, they could have a look at these 5 areas of development and then say, oh, is my child achieving that? Yes, they are. No, they're not. Maybe they'll be achieving things in 3 areas and not 2. Maybe there's an additional concern there as well. So if it's identified that the child's not quite reaching these milestones, maybe additional support is required. And that's where we can have conversations with the families. So we can sit there with the blank document, openly talk. Do you see your child achieving this at home? Oh, that's fantastic. What about this step? Unfortunately, we're not seeing it here. This is what we're seeing here. Have that back to and fro conversation. So it's not sitting there saying your child can't do this. It's let's see what your child can do and how we can support them in different avenues. Right. And that's a good icebreaker with the families.
Yeah, for sure. And so now we've identified that there is a delay. How does NDIS then fit into the conversation with the families and at that point, Kia?
So it's getting together with the families again and having that second conversation. So we use that early ABLES report that I was also talking about earlier. Now that report has been designed by the Monash University, and that sets a very good benchmark of helping the children to achieve. That document can't be accessed by families. It needs to be accessed by children's services. Right. However, they can have it printed and that can be there in the conversation with you. That's a great document. It visually shows where your child is and gives you goals to help you get them where they need to be, even with tips. So you've got where your child should be on the very next page. It's what you can do to support your child to reach that milestone, which is fantastic. But it will also is a good time to speak with families about the NDIS and how they can support their child as well. Yeah. Many families hear NDIS and think it needs to be for a child with a form of diagnosis, and that's what scares parents, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so the funding comes from the NDIS itself, but there's a different program for it for children under the age of 6 called the Early Childhood Early Intervention, or now it's called the Early Childhood Approach. You know, as a plan manager, I know that the funding that's available is for capacity building and to help the child achieve those goals. And the money then is available for therapists that parents can use with other organizations like the childcare centers to see how they can build the capacity for the child and raise them up to come to those standards and reach those milestones, how can you then get on to this sort of funding? And what do you do to assist?
Okay, so the NDIS funding can be a very lengthy process. So we try and get the parents on board and lots of support really, really early because they can be waiting. So we get together with the room educators who spend the most time with the children, and we write a supporting document. We outline what the child is really, really good at and where extra assistance from therapists like speech therapist, occupational therapist would really benefit the child. And clearly we write down in point dots how they can support. And we sign it off with our name. And of course, we're always available for follow-up phone conversations if they choose to contact us. But that's all that is required to make a NDIS application, is a little bit of evidence and of course what the parents are experiencing at home. That is all that's required to get your referral looked upon.
So don't they need a doctor's report as well?
They don't. They don't. Any report will strengthen their case. However, no, it's not required. And sometimes it's really lengthy wait getting to the paediatrician as well. So, you know, if you can get your foot in the door with this application, and let's say a paediatrician referral form comes 2 months later, then you can add it. It's never too late to add your evidence and add your support.
Perfect. So now that they've got the NDIS plan, what happens at a childcare center when they do finally get the plan? I understand that it does take a bit of time, and it can take months. But when they do get the plan, what would you do then, Kia, as an educator?
As an educator, we like to sit with the families again and go through their NDIS report and the goals. And we like to discuss their goals with them as well to see what we can help them with and implement at the centre as well to support and keep the care continued from home to care life. For example, with some of the children that have these struggles, let's say toileting. A child that I've known was not toileting at home, wouldn't sit on the potty, had outbursts. You know, mum and dad were like, nah, you're never going to be toilet trained, way too hard. They spoke about it with the childcare educators. They said, well, let us embed something here. Let's try him on the potty here. Within 2 weeks, he was toilet trained. He needed to learn that skill in an environment that was structured, that it was very black and white. At this time, all the other children are getting their nappy change, going potty, and that was something very clear to him because it was the way it was, very set routine. There it was, that's what I do. So when home came around, here's your potty, this is what we do, child toilet trained in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Very, very different. So some things can be embedded more so in the childcare centre before the home life, even with younger children with learning to feed themselves. Parents come in, it's on a goal that they're going to learn to feed themselves. They're not at home. They stand there and they scream with their mouth open like a bird. We get them into the childcare setting when we're all around the table together. We encourage them to use their spoon. The child now can feed themselves. They might not at home for a few more weeks, but they've got the skill and eventually it continues on in home life. So the early childhood education is really valuable to try and embed practices as well that will support the child in their learning.
Yeah, I have a personal story about that. My daughter, when she was little, she's in her 20s now, but when she was little, I found it so hard to feed her. She would not eat. But then when she started going to the childcare center, she came back and she was eating. And I was like, I've been trying all this time and it just wasn't working. What sort of magic have they done? So I was really happy with that outcome, I can tell you, because it wasn't a struggle. It wasn't a fight every day when it came to dinner time. So, you know, we all want the best for our children, and having as much support is great. You know how they say, the olden days saying something about having a whole village to raise a child. Isn't that fantastic that we live in a country and in a community where we are able able to do that through services like the NDIS, through childcare centres, through other maternal health and other supports that the council can provide and so forth. So that's fantastic. Well, thank you. Anything else that you would like to mention to families who are struggling in this area, Kia, of developmental delays?
Speak up, I guess, is a good one. Reach out to people who are willing to support you. There is definitely help there. There's lots of knowledgeable people around. As soon as you find them, you're going to just grab onto them and never let them go. I'm sure your child will do very well. There's lots of support out there.
Thank you. Thanks, Kia. Thank you for all your time. And I'm sure we'll have you back on the show sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Take care.